You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Doge, and more. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments throughout the world's leading crypto derivatives markets. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of crypto derivatives. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again. It is Monday. It is 2 p.m. Central. It's 3 p.m. Eastern. Do you know what's going on in these crazy crypto markets? Well, let's find out together, shall we? It is time for the Crypto Rundown. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the THE, optionsinsider.com, as well as from the network upon which so many of you are mainlining these days. And man, we have a lot to get to on the show. Hope you're having a good start to your trading week. If you like what you hear, this show, anything else on the network, throw a like, a star, a comment, a rating, a review, all that stuff in aggregate on whatever platform you get it on. It's available just about everywhere these days. Whatever you do, it all in aggregate helps new people continue to discover the content. Of course, if you want to go above and beyond, discover more great content, including a lot of great pro Q&As that do touch on the world of crypto and indeed volatility in a lot of great fashions, then head on over to theoptionsinsider.com/pro. That's the place to go to learn more. As we learn who's joining us today on the old crypto hot seat, I'm pleased to welcome back our old buddy, Mr. Greg Magadini, the Director of Derivatives from Amberdata. Mr. Greg, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown, sir.
Hey, thank you so much, Mark.
I like this. Look, I can hear you. It's like you're right next to me, sir. No more of this crazy phone nonsense.
No more drop connections. I love it.
Yeah, we kicked the last century technology to the curb, sir. And I haven't seen you since the big panel here back when Chicago was, 70, 80 degrees colder.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that was a great panel, first of all. I really enjoyed it. It was nice to be out there talking about this stuff. But I got sick as a dog in Chicago in the -5 degree weather. So I came back home and I was in bed for a couple of days, but it's okay.
You have bad health luck with those sessions. Whenever I invite you to a panel, you either get struck down with COVID or struck down with something else, either immediately before or immediately after. You even missed the bacon station. That was the best part of the whole show, sir.
That's right. Yeah, I got to make sure to drink more vitamin C next time.
Or maybe just drink more, period. It'll kill whatever bug you got going on out there. But you know what, Greg? It's a boring time in the crypto markets. Not much really happening since the last time you and I chatted. So I guess we can probably just end it here. What do you think?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think it's quite the opposite.
I think it is off the hook. Let's get going, listeners. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, listeners, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down all the action in the world's leading digital asset. Yes, the old BTC. Remember, if you want to kick the tires and light the fires on all this data we're going to touch on here on the show and really just scratch the surface of what's available over, you got to go kick the tires for yourselves. Amberdata.io, Amberdata.io, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. Greg will be very happy to see you over there. So a lot of good stuff cooking over there and a lot of good stuff cooking in the crypto markets this week. My goodness. I think the only thing I could say really is just wow. Since the last time we got together here on the show, listeners, it's like that rising tide we've been talking about for a while. It's been focused very much on Bitcoin and certainly on ETH, and they have popped hard since the last time we talked. But also, it seems like everything else just kind of got caught up in the rising tide and just lifted to new heights out there. As we're coming into the start of the show, listeners, Bitcoin north of 67,000, 67,309 to be precise. Bitcoin last show 54,409. So it's only up, nearly 13,000 handles, 12,900 handles since our last show. Oh my goodness. The high came right before showtime, actually, 458. And the low came way back down, threatening 50K. In the wrong direction. 59.31 back on February 26th. We did a lot of living. You're talking 17,000 handles nearly in range since our last show. So, Greg, I don't know what to say about that other than wow. Just crazy time, sir. What's been catching your eye out there in the big dog Bitcoin recently? And since, of course, the last time you and I chatted on that panel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a couple things. Obviously, Bitcoin spot prices are exploding really, really quickly. So that's translating into some really interesting stuff in the derivative space. So if I look at just a basis trade, let's just call it the 30-day basis on CME, that's a little shy of 20%. On the CeFi exchanges, it's around a little bit higher than that, around 24%. So that's really just kind of like that cash and carry trade, delta neutral, just set it and forget it. It's a little harder on CME because you got to manage collateral, but that right now is paying about 20%. So that alone is a very interesting trade. Now, the reason why it's paying 20% is because everyone wants to pay up to get long crypto right now, and or get long Bitcoin right now, and there's a lot of opportunity cost to being in a basis trade right now. So one of the things that my good friend Gravity Sucks over at Amberdata said is, don't sell the all-time highs, and I totally agree. We're just breaking new all-time highs right now. This is, uncharted territory. Let's remember, this asset class is only, 15 years old. No one really knows the true value of this stuff. We're now in the all-time high territory. We're just threatening it. We're a couple grand away. And so the sky's the limit, so to speak. So that's really, really interesting. And then when we look at how is the vol market being priced, well, right now, if I look at 30-day at the money vol, it's about 75, whereas the weekly is about 79 or 80. But let's remember, we had this type of action in Q4 of 2020, and 30-day vol hit 150. So vol's high right now, but it can definitely go higher. And then lastly, if we look at the skew, the 25 delta risk reversal, that's the 25 delta call minus the 25 delta put. Right now, it's trading about, call it, 7 or 8 points over on the call side. That's on the higher end of the historical range. But again, in Q4 2020, it went as high as 40 to 50 points for the 30-day days till expiration. So all that to say is I think there's more upside. The way that you could play it is you could buy the call spreads, so you can hedge out a little bit of that volatility pricing, and you can take advantage of that, relatively historically steep call wing. So all those things put together seems really interesting to me. And this is kind of the flow we've been seeing for the past few days now.
Yeah, the last time you joined us on the show, Greg, was back in the middle of December of last year. And obviously a lot's changed since then, not just the price level. I think the last time you and I chatted, we were talking about, Bitcoin and ETH just recovering from some near-term lows in the mid-20s in the vol. It seems like a lifetime ago now, doesn't that, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. That's so funny. We just had hit all-time lows in terms of implied and realized, and now we're, realized is back in the median level, but, we can go ahead and threaten higher levels if this continues.
Yeah, let's break down some of those vol numbers right now, listeners. As you might imagine, a little bit juicier, a little bit frothier, even than just since our last show, even than just a week ago. It's crazy how things roll out there. But yeah, let's start near dated and work our way out, shall we? We'll start in the weeklies. Everyone's obsessed with near dated these days. On our last show, a little bit north of 52, 52.4. Coming into the start of the show today, 78. So as you might expect, near dated vol rocking and rolling out there, listeners. Let's go a little bit farther out to a more standardized metric, 30-day vol. Last show, 54. This week, 74.5, up 20.5 points, even in the 30-day vol. So yeah, vol is popping. Again, I just broke down. We had a 17,000 point range. If vol wasn't popping, something would be wrong, listeners. And going out all the way 6 months. That's where the calmer, the cooler, the usually saner heads prevail out there. But you know what? Even there, they're getting a little bit frothy, a little bit topsy-turvy at almost a 74, 73.3 right now. That's in the 6-month vol, listeners. Last week, it was 61.9. So vol even popping all the way out on the term structure there, which again, kind of goes back to what Greg was just saying. There's demand for that upside in Bitcoin right now, and it is being expressed in the vol here. Let's see if the same thing is happening in the skew. And, spoiler alert, the answer is yes. It'd be kind of hard to have one without the other when you have moves of this magnitude, listeners. Let's again start near dated and work our way out. The weekly skew, 7-day skew, it was pretty much flat on the show last week, about a positive 0.6, which I would pretty much chalk up to flat. This week, positive 7.5, so spinning up fully almost 7 points to the upside. Again, kind of reflecting what Greg was just talking about, that premium to the calls over the puts out there, just reflecting that upside bias, which again, hard to argue with it given what we're seeing out there. 30-day skew, so a little bit more standardized metric. Last week, sub 2.5, about 2.35. Coming in to start of the show today, a positive 7. So again, right along that same level Greg was just talking about, and just again, showing the demand for the upside. And even if we go out 6 months, usually things are a little bit calmer out there, but it was pretty robust this time last week. It was at a 5.6 on the show last week. This week, 7.6, so ticking up 2 points. Greg, you kind of just talking about the skew and the vol data, but anything in those numbers I just ran down resonate with you or something else you want to add, sir?
Actually, yeah, something else I do want to add. So this is really peculiar to the crypto markets. And you wouldn't see this in traditional markets, but really the correlation of basis with spot prices. So what I mean by that is that if you look at the futures term structure, the basis becomes very wide, and essentially, the price contango becomes steep when people want to get long. And so if we look at, for example, the December futures contract on Deribit, right now it's trading $75,000. So that's about $8,600 of premium to spot. And so if you're thinking about, if you're a long spot and you're thinking of selling a covered call, for example, here's just one structure. Well, the covered call, the call that you're selling has an underlying that's $8,000 more expensive than spot markets. So that call is really expensive. Now, something that can happen on the put side, if you want to buy a protective put or do some sort of downside strategies, is that you can expect that when there is eventually a pullback, a lot of that basis will contract as well. So let's just say Bitcoin pulls back from 67 to 60. Well, not only will there be a drop in the back end in the December contract to reflect that $7,000 pullback, but then the basis will also contract. So it'll probably be from 8,600 down to say 4,000. So there's a lot of extra juice that occurs there. And so that's just one of those things I think it's really important to remember when you're looking at trading crypto vol, is that there's an extra juice in terms of the basis. And what you can see is right now we have a backwardated term structure, but you can see term structures be a lot more resilient to backwardation because long dated vol will also reflect that premium or discount in the expected basis.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Resistance to backwardation, not a thing you usually talk about on the show here, but you're right. Kind of another fascinating development. Again, these markets are just, pick your adjective, Greg, except boring. You can't say boring, but just about any other adjective you want to apply to these markets right now does apply, which is why I just go with the generic wow, listeners. This is just a wow week out here. Let's keep on rolling. Is it a wow week on the OI front out there on Deribit? The answer is kinda. Calls 153,500. That's actually down 16,000. You might say, how is that possible? How are calls down? Everyone wants to buy calls. That's true, but we have been blowing through a lot of strikes to the upside, listeners. And what happens when that happens? People invariably are going to take some of that upside off. So that's probably why that OI is down. If you have something to the upside, you have to do something with it eventually. So that's probably what we're seeing out there. Puts, though, roaring back to life. 178,000 puts open on Deribit, and that's up 74,000. So that's a big swing out there as well. Intriguing, so much put AI is going up out there. Again, going back to what we were saying about the skew, there isn't a lot of juice in those puts right now, but I don't know if this continues. Maybe people think we're getting top heavy. Maybe we might see that change. Maybe we might see puts certainly growing from an OI perspective, not yet exploding from a vol perspective, but things could certainly change. What is exploding, Greg, though, on the crypto front are just all of these ETPs and just underlyings that everyone loves to sling out here. I mean, they're just on the rampage right now. In fact, Bitto, we've been talking about Bitto on this show for a while. This might be, I'll have to go check and see, but this might be, maybe I'll check in, Greg, with our buddy from the panel, Mr. Flowmaster, because he has all this data out there. But this might be the busiest day in Bitto options, certainly that I can recall in quite some time. Already on the tape, listeners, 182,000 contracts in Bitto. What's going on? Well, Bitto's only up about $5. It's at 30 3/4 when we kicked off the show. It's actually up more since then. It's at about 31.15 right now. My goodness. It's on going ex-div today as well. Something else to remember. We always talk about the juicy dividend that's being paid out in Bitto. That's a function of the term structure out there on the futures at CME. That dividend right now is about as juicy as I've ever seen. Nearly 73 cents a share. So if you're holding on to some Bitto right now, you're getting a nice pop in the underlying and you're getting a nice cash payout. So I don't know. There are worse things, Mr. Greg. Have you been watching this universe of the ETPs and related names like Mara just being caught up in this whirlwind, Greg?
Yes, definitely. So I think Bitto and BitX are two interesting things. So BitX is a 2 times Bitto performance ETF. So there's a couple like peculiar dynamics to keep in mind. So as you just mentioned, there's a huge dividend in Bitto. So there's like a positive correlation to dividend in the spot price to dividend, meaning that as Bitto gains performance, as the Bitcoin futures perform and there's P&L, a lot of that P&L gets paid out as a form of dividend. If prices drop, that dividend goes away. So what happens is you kind of get like this flattening effect to the spot price appreciation. And then how that actually translates in the options markets is what you'll see is that out of the money options trade really on vol, but at the money options start to really price in the forward price, including the dividend. So you can see like a long dated leap, like a 1 year or 2 year. Once they're in the money, they quickly start to trade at intrinsic value because it's pricing in that forward being so much cheaper due to dividend payouts. And so types of structures like 1x2s or flies or things like that, they just behave a lot differently because the vol goes away as the option becomes in the money, and then the out of the money options start to compress as well as they get closer to the money. So that's really interesting. The other interesting aspect is BitX. So again, 2 times the Bitto ETF. So let's not forget, there's that 16 to 20% contango roll in the futures. Well, BitX gets hit twice as hard as that, so there's a lot of decay there. But what's even more interesting is, the 2x effect of the 2x ETF decay effect. What do I mean by that? Well, if you think about just a portfolio, if you drop 50%, you need to rally 100% just to get back to even. So with 2 times performance ETFs, what happens is it's the same deal. So you're always price dropping from a higher denominator, then rallies from a lower denominator. So over time that decays. Well, this is super even more pronounced in high volatility assets because the drops with high volatility are so big that the subsequent recovery is going to be so much smaller because of the lower denominator. So now if you look at something like BitX, that thing's just going to decay for a few reasons. One, the decay effect. Two, it's 2 times the contango. And so there's a lot of interesting structures to be done there as well, especially for like the out of the money call stuff, if you're looking to hedge a long position, so on and so forth. So those 2 products are really interesting, and those are great opportunities in the market. And I think a lot of times people just want to get long, and there's not a lot of venues to trade options, and people don't necessarily just think of those things. And so there's a lot of, edge in the flow, so to speak.
So we like bringing you on, Greg. You bring up some of these interesting points like BitX, not one we talk about a lot here on the show for a variety of reasons, including the fact that the ADV is around 3,000 contracts a day. So no one really touches that except for days like today, Greg. I wonder why. It's starting to pop a little bit today. It's up about 6 1/3 or 14%. Also seeing 8,300 contracts on the tape out there in BitX today, including 2,003 of the March 50s, 5-0s. That kind of gets back to what you were just saying, Greg, about the in-the-money calls, but those are now $1.75 in the money. Yeah, wow, that's interesting paper out there. Again, if that keeps up, we might have to start talking about BitX more on the show. But again, both of these products just show the impact of dividends and probably some of the starkest ways you're going to see in a lot of the products we talk about on all of our shows on the network. I can't think of a lot of other products that are throwing out 73-cent dividends on any sort of a regular basis. So yeah, this is just in the last month. So, I mean, yeah, the dividend yield on some of these products and the impact they have, listeners. Very crazy. BITO right now, like we said, at about $31, just lighting it up out there today. The size position out there, still the Jan 2025 30s. Those seemed like pretty optimistic not too long ago when we were hanging out at, 15, 16 in BITO. Now they're in the money, all 107,000 of those. So very interesting. I know, Greg, you were working on some upside ratios in BITO the last time we chatted. Are you still in those? Have you rolled out? How did that work out?
Yeah, actually, it worked out really nicely because of that compression effect. So my near strike, which was the 20 strike, started trading at intrinsic. And in the 35 strikes, even though vol was going higher and spot was moving higher, they didn't really feel the effect. So the offset compression really helped offset the positive P&L from my long strike. So overall, I eventually just took this off just because, breaking out all-time highs. I don't know where this thing's going to go. But that type of structure is very forgiving. So I definitely really like it. And those are the types of structures I really like to trade, especially in like special situation products like this.
Yeah, you're right. And a lot of other products like a VIX, that would have been pretty face melting. But, out here, you could get away with it, which is fascinating, again, which what makes these products. We could do a whole show just on the crypto ETPs and the related products like Amera, listeners, which is having a crazy day in and of itself in the other direction to BITO. BITO's on the rampage, up about 5 handles since we last chatted about it. Mara going the other way, down about 5.6. Is that about a 24.80 when we kicked off the show? But it has gained about over $1 of that back now. It's at a 26.10. So these things are just moving all over the place, listeners, rocking and rolling. Just, again, wow. Just the technical description for all of this. Just wow. The ADV continuing to skyrocket, 490,000 contracts. It's up 83,000 just since this time last week. And you know what? They've already eclipsed that. It's already over 500,000 contracts on the tape out there in Mara. By the way, I forgot to mention the vol on BITO. It's an 85 on the 30-day vol, at the money vol. It's up 23 points. Mara says, hold my bear kid at 141, up about 3 points or so on the week, actually. So actually it's ticked up even more at about 146. So my goodness, these things are just on fire out here, listeners. In terms of action out there in Mara today, what is the big dog? 50,000 of the March 30s expiring this Friday out there. Looks like a lot of them going up closer to mid-market. Let's look really, really quickly. Yeah, some people dumping them for prices all the way up to, looks like $1.65 earlier this morning. So that was a decent trade at the time. if you got those off, I'm sure you're not too mad about that. Probably coming back to buy those back now somewhere at prices around 55 cents, it looks like. So intriguing stuff out there. Last week on the show, the size position was on the put side. That remains the case this week. The March 17 puts, 33,000 of those bad boys taking the top spot this week. Again, given all the paper out there today, that might very well change. Again, 50,000 just of the 8s expiring on Friday. Again, also, they're going to go the way of the dodo since our next show. So interesting stuff out there. A lot of near-dated paper. Greg, Mara brings a lot of other, let's say, interesting complications to the mix because it's not like a BITO or some of these other products which are just tracking or attempting to track the underlying. There's a lot of other things going on with Mara being a going concern that the price of Bitcoin is just one part of that. So this thing has been all over the place over the last couple of months. Is this one you're watching out there as well?
That's interesting. I follow the price of Mara, but I don't follow the fundamental or the technical details very closely. But I definitely like the equity related crypto stuff, crypto related equities. And one that's a special one is MSTR, and maybe we could touch on that in a little bit as well.
Sure. Let's get there now. Why do you like MSTR so much, sir?
Well, this is like a really interesting dynamic. So not only is MSTR rallying with Bitcoin, but it's sort of like a higher beta version of Bitcoin. And so anyone who's been around the space knows Michael Saylor. And so he's been borrowing against his shares to buy Bitcoin and essentially has Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And now MSTR has rallied so much that the market cap is big enough to be included at S&P 500. So now you got these index addition dynamics where now anyone who's buying the index, once MSTR gets added to the S&P 500, anyone who's buying the S&P 500 is buying by definition some MSTR, which by definition gets you exposure to Bitcoin, which helps support MSTR's share price, which enables Michael Saylor to buy even more Bitcoin. So it creates like this channel for Bitcoin buying from all the traditional finance folks, whether they want to or not. And so I think this is part of the reason why we're seeing extreme outperformance in Bitcoin versus some of the other cryptos, when typically bull markets have altcoin outperformance. So that's really interesting. And so we'll kind of see how that goes. But for example, MSTR is up 24% today alone, whereas Bitcoin is up about 7% today.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. You're right. Just a crazy day out there as well, just adding to the wow factor for the day and for the week, listeners. Up 24%, 257 handles, hanging out at a 1337. Doing pretty well on the options front as well. The ADV is 56,000 contracts out there, doing 88,000 out there today. The big dog kind of surprisingly small for such an action-packed day. 3,500 of the 1,800 calls going up today, listeners. They expire on Friday. I don't know, Greg. You like the 1800s by Friday when we're hanging out at 1300? Even for a name like this, I mean, it did just pop 250 handles in a day, so who am I to look askance at it? But that seems like quite the Herculean move by Friday, sir. What do you think?
I definitely don't like buying them, but I hate selling them. So I think it's one of those contracts, like just don't want to touch it. I don't see a trade either way because it would have been so tempting to sell the 1300s on Friday, but then now we're here. So it's one of those things that it's hard to see what's going to happen.
Looks like they traded as high as $27.60 today for the 1800s expiring on Friday, listeners. Wow. Yeah, that's some call skew, Greg. Wow. People keep asking if we're back in the meme stock days of 2021. You see a call skew like that, it's kind of hard to argue that we aren't, listeners. But, we could spend the rest of the show talking Bitcoin, but there's some action in the alt world as well. So let's get there now. A little bit of the old altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, listeners, strap in. We got more wildness in store for us here in the altcoin universe, including right when we kick it off here in the top 10, when we break it all down from a market cap perspective, because there's going to be some names in here that we haven't talked about in the top 10 in quite some time. if not ever, for our number 10 here. Recently, we were talking about Tron making its way in there, Avalanche, a few others. Not this week, listeners. It is all Shiba Inu all the time. Yes, fighting its way into the top 10 this week with a market cap nearly 20 billion, 19.6 billion worth of market cap. My goodness. Now, some people will shake their heads at that. Others in our audience will say, woo, big Shiba fans, whichever side of the fence you fall on, you know things are rocking and rolling when Shiba fights its way into the top 10. My goodness. Number 9, right behind it. If that's not enough meme coin for you listeners, how about a little bit of Doge, a little taste of Doge right on top of it? A 25 billion worth of market cap for Doge at a 17.5 cents. Man, we haven't seen Doge at that level in quite some time. My goodness, man, this rising tide is truly lifting all boats with it. Number 8, Cardano at 27.4 billion. Number 7, USD coin, 28.8 billion. I like to think maybe we were responsible here for number 6. We were just saying on the show last week, man, what's it going to take for XRP to finally get out of its own way? Well, apparently it was us talking about it, or maybe something else. Maybe. I'm open to that possibility as well, listeners. Almost 65 cents in XRP, so almost a dime pop. That's a huge move in XRP these days. Almost 35.5 billion worth of market cap. I do feel for all you XRP holders. You've been sitting on the sidelines while all this other stuff has been going on. So nice to see you get a little bit of love out there as well. Number 5, Solana, another one just on the rampage. 130 coming into the show. 57.5. I mean, wow, just wow. Number 4, BNB, 62.1 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, almost getting at the 100B level as well, 99.5 billion. Number 2, it's ETH, just on the rampage as well, 431 billion. And the number 1 big dog, man, just seemed like not too long ago, Greg, we were saying, man, if Bitcoin can just get back to 1 trillion worth of market cap, all will be right with the world. Here we are now, Greg, 1.3 trillion worth of market cap. I mean, we are in some rarefied air here. I know, Greg, you're not the biggest meme coin guy. How do you feel seeing Shiba and Doge holding down spots in the top 10 right now, sir?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. I think it's very telling of sort of the nature of our market right now. And we're kind of seeing that in all the markets. It's like there's a lot of upside momentum across the board. So altcoins, smaller altcoins having upside momentum makes sense to me. A lot of people are seeing Bitcoin and they're saying, okay, like, why do I want to buy a $67,000 asset when I can buy like a fraction of a penny one? And there's also this, what hasn't moved yet phenomenon. So people want to, buy these smaller things and hope to catch a wave. So it makes sense that altcoins are having a bid. And if we look at, tech stocks and things like that, we're having these explosive moves everywhere. So it's no surprise to me that these smaller sort of lower quality coins or less established coins are seeing a lot of this move.
Lower quality. How dare you, sir? How dare you? Besmirch the Doges and the Shibas of the world. Let's get out to number 2 in market cap. Number 1 in a lot of your hearts there, listeners. It is ETH. And yeah, man, ETH has been putting up a show a little bit as well. 31.73 on our show last week. Coming in to start the show today, almost 3,600. I'm sure if I re-racked it now, it probably would be north of that. Up about 422 handles. Did briefly kiss 36.08 earlier today. The low came threatening 3,000 in the other direction, down to 30.38. That was, again, right after our show last week as well. So a lot of living. Nearly 600 handles just since our show last week, which, if you know ETH, is quite the move. Before I get into all the vol and everything else, Greg, I know you're a big proponent of ETH, a big watcher of ETH. What's been going through your mind as we've seen this whirlwind out there in ETH over the last few months?
Yeah. So ETH relative to Bitcoin has, been underperforming. Anyone who's long ETH right now feels that pain. There's a couple really interesting aspects to this. So obviously we just talked about the dynamics of like MicroStrategy being part of the reason why the Bitcoin rally is so strong. The Bitcoin spot ETFs, which are some of the best performing ETFs in terms of flows in history, going straight into Bitcoin. And then we have the narrative of halving that's coming around April 19th, where the issuance rate of Bitcoin drops from 6.25 down to 3 1/8 every 10 minutes or every block. So all those factors are very Bitcoin specific. And so people are kind of, overlooking ETH. But if we look at the supply dynamics of ETH, they're actually even better than Bitcoin. So Bitcoin has a decrease in the issuance rate, but ETH actually has a negative, well, flat to slightly negative issuance rate right now. So we had this EIP 1559 a few years back, and that essentially means that every transaction on the ETH network creates an ETH burn in terms of the transaction fee gets burned and the supply decreases. And so now if we look at the dynamics of supply, right now the supply in ETH is about 120 million tokens, and it's held steady there since September 2022. And so that's really encouraging. Then we have the fact that ETH is not a proof of work, but it's a proof of stake. So what happens is that people take their ETH and they lock him up and stake him. So right now the stake ratio is about 26% of the supply, which means that there's a smaller float. So really the total tradable ETH is something like 85,000 or whatever the math comes out to be, 90,000, something like that. So that's a very kind of bullish aspect. And then lastly, we have this ETH spot ETF deadline in, I think, May 23rd, sometime in May. And so that theoretically has the same dynamics in terms of the demand side for ETH. So, Bitcoin has already paved the way and shown the demand for retail flows in a spot ETF, while retail and institutional and retirement flows, all that stuff. And so it's already been proven. So if we get the spot ETH ETF, theoretically, there should be no difference in the types of flows that ETH sees as well. So now we have ETH with better dynamics in terms of supply side and potentially the same types of demand side dynamics. So that all that bodes really well for the ETH price. And then lastly, I mean, I would imagine that there's a lot, most of the world is on the sidelines here. Most of the world is not invested in crypto. And so they see Bitcoin rallying like this, and they say, well, what else can I buy? I don't want to buy Bitcoin. I don't want to chase the top. Well, then ETH becomes sort of the next really interesting asset. It has a lower market cap. It has a psychologically lower price point. And then if you look at the Bitcoin ETH ratio, it's at the historical, call it past 5 years of lows, the lows in the past 5 years. So all those dynamics bode very well. It's just a matter of time to be able to sit out this position and handle the short-term underperformance.
You've been all in on ETH pretty much as long as I've known you out there. Is this still one of your core holdings? You still all in? Sounds like it from what you're saying out here.
So yeah, in terms of long-term holdings, I'm 50-50 Bitcoin and ETH. I don't really have any other coins except for a few DeFi protocol coins where I use the DeFi protocols. For the DeFi protocols, such as like DeFi options and things like that, trading ETH typically is the most liquid version of those protocols just because they're built on ETH. But yes, preference is still towards ETH, but long-term holdings are diversified about 50-50 between Bitcoin and ETH.
All right, interesting. Maybe we'll test those preferences in a minute. But before we get there, listeners, let's get out to what's lighting it up out there in ETH right now. Spoiler alert, it's going to sound kind of reminiscent of what we just ran through with Bitcoin. Skew and vol both up. There, we did it all. Let's start on the near dated and work our way out, listeners. ETH starting at a little bit higher starting point than Bitcoin vol was last week, especially in the weeklies, at about a 62.3 this time last week on the 7-day vol. And ETH coming into start of this week at a 77. Again, Greg, it seems like not that long ago, you and I were kind of wringing our hands about how ETH vol was trading at a discount to Bitcoin vol. You remember that? It seems like yesterday.
Yeah, it was really a trend in 2023.
It was all the hot thing. And then all of a sudden, here we are back to what I would dare to say, maybe a bit of normalcy out there. I've always viewed ETH, maybe incorrectly, Greg, but I've always viewed ETH as the small cap to Bitcoin's large cap. And volatility-wise, I've kind of viewed them in a similar scenario. So good to see ETH getting a little bit of juice back, including going out to the monthly. It was at about a 59.2 on the 1 month side this time a week ago. This week, 72.5. So again, getting a little bit frothy out there on the ETH vol front, going all the way out 6 months, same deal. almost a 65 on the show last week, 64 and 3/4. This week, 72.3. So ticking up pretty much across the board. And yeah, spoiler alert, it's going to be the same for the skew listeners. A weekly skew, 7-day skew. It was positive last week, but only ever so slightly, about 1 1/4 to the upside. This week, a positive 5. So still feeling its oats to the upside. Going out a month, pretty much the same deal. 1.8 a week ago. This week, 5 1/4. And going out 6 months, it was at a 6.5. So long-term ETH holders were still pretty active last week, and this week they're up to a positive 8. Greg, anything in that vol or skew data you want to dive in on a little more?
Well, I think the overall trend about ETH being, theoretically a more volatile asset, I 100% agree with that. I think what was really interesting about 2023, however, is that the vol for Bitcoin came in safe haven moments, SVB banking crisis, Middle Eastern war, things like that. That created a bid for Bitcoin. And so we had these dynamics where Bitcoin was outperforming in terms of vol, the other cryptos, because it was a different dynamic, or it was a different type of bid for crypto or Bitcoin specifically. In a bull market, I think we go back to traditional dynamics where altcoins theoretically outperform. Obviously, there's a short-term effect right now with the Bitcoin spot ETF and all the things we talked about, but I think the mean relationship is going to be ETH has more vol than Bitcoin.
Let's keep on rolling with the rest of this altcoin universe, listeners. OI front, ETH kind of up across the board there as well, calls and puts. So folks pretty active in both directions. 1.82 million calls open on Deribit right now. It's up about 220,000 from this time last week. The puts also seeing a nice resurgence in OI, 807,000 on the tape, up about 145,000 from this time last week. Well, let's keep on rolling. Greg, one of the other big trends in the altcoin universe right now, and has been for the better part of the last 6 months, has been this just pronounced uptrend in Solana. It wasn't that long ago we were talking about Solana options on the show. We were getting a lot of Solana options data, and then, of course, all the FTX happened. Solana really got taken to the woodshed. We kind of washed our hands of it for a while on the show, certainly from an options perspective. We kept an eye on the underlying, but we never really got back into the options. Maybe time to revisit that now, because this uptrend has been just, I think, again, wow is the technical term. And again, this past week, continuing apace. 109 and 3/4 roughly on the show last week, 129 almost and 3/4 start of the show this week. So up pretty much 20 handles over the course of the past week. Greg, we've had a lot of guests coming on the show over the last few months talking up Solana again as ETH, call it what you will, an ETH rival, an ETH competitor out there, talking about the efficiency and the fees and everything else, ETH versus Solana. Where do you fall on that? I know you were like me. I think you kind of washed your hands of a lot of Solana post FTX as well, but it has been fascinating to watch in the last few months. Have you been watching this meteoric rise? And what do you think about all these folks who are coming on the show now and talking, ETH versus Solana in the same sentence?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. Deribit is just launching their Solana options once again this week. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, how those services are priced, and what kind of activity happens there. In terms of fundamentals, I'm just not as well versed in Solana fundamentals, so I don't really follow them or compare them to ETH. But it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out in the bull markets.
And again, going back to just your price point argument from earlier, people on the sidelines are looking for a cheaper asset. Not quite as cheap as it was a few months ago, or even last week, but still orders of magnitude cheaper than certainly the first two we talked about here on the show today. And Greg, it's good to see a little bit of love for XRP again this week. I mean, this thing has been languishing at around 55 cents for I've forgotten how long. This week, getting a bit of an uptick, up over a dime, up to about 65 cents this week. So I'll have to go look in and see what drove it outside of just the rising tide lifting all boats. But have you been watching the, shall we say, sad saga that is XRP over the last few years, Greg? And what do you think about it finally maybe breaking out a little bit? Maybe, in air quotes.
Yeah, well, XRP is also another crypto altcoin that's going to have an options market on it pretty soon. And I think that's going to be a little bit later this month on Deribit as well. So that'll be interesting. But as long as I've been around crypto, XRP has always been around. it's always kind of the value proposition to me never seemed really interesting. And so I'm not like a big XRP person. I'm sure there's some good trades there, some good setups, and it'll be interesting to see how the option plays kind of shake out. But outside of that, it's not something I really follow. But I do think kind of to that same phenomenon, what's a cheap thing to buy in terms of spot prices, even though the market cap's still relatively high. I think people will buy XRP just for that reason alone.
Yeah, I love the notion. I love everything about an options market on a 50-cent asset. That's just fantastic. I love people coming in and the prospect of spending 13, 15, 20 cents for an out-of-the-money call on a 55-cent underlying. I love everything about that, Greg. It's just hilarious to me. So I look forward to seeing how all of that data on Solana and XRP, when their options start hitting the tape over there on Deribit. A little bit more meat for us to chew on over here on the show. And let us not forget he tells you he's big on Bitcoin and ETH. His biggest holding really is, of course, good old Doge. 8.8 cents last week, 17.6 cents, exactly doubling on the week. Just, again, going back to scoop up whatever you can get out there. Maybe the cheaper, the better. Litecoin having a nice run as well. 71.25 this week, 89.25, up a little over 18 handles on the week there as well. Cardano, not to be outdone, 61.7 cents last week, 77 cents this week, up a little over 15 cents on the week. Polkadot, 8.04 this week, 9.93. So nice pop out there as well, nearly $2. And of course, our old friend Shiba Inu actually gaining a decimal point this week. It was 0.0000973. So that 5 times fast this week, a whopping 0.0003326. So there you go. Not quite Shiba Lambo mode, but closer. You can get the hubcap this week versus last week. Greg, before we roll on out of the altcoin universe and out of the show for this week, anything else in the world of altcoin really catching your eye, or maybe a project or a token or an asset that's really maybe on your radar you want to share with our folks? Now is the time, sir. Have at it.
Well, I think what's really going to be interesting is the altcoin markets coming out this month. So just to recap, we have Solana options coming on Deribit, we have XRP options, and then Matic options. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then obviously the layer 2 altcoins seem to be something to keep an eye out for the Ethereum ecosystem. Everything seems to be moving to app chains and layer 2 channels. And so we'll kind of see how that plays out and if that is an organic scaling solution for Ethereum itself.
So, Greg, what you're telling me is I didn't have enough data to crunch on the show already. Now I'm going to start adding Solana options and XRP options. It's going to be a 3-hour show pretty soon.
Love it.
Well, certainly there's enough data to crunch and certainly enough activity out here to keep us going. So, listeners, if you're one of the many, even on the sidelines like Greg was talking about, glad you could join us here for the show. And maybe we enlightened you on some aspects of the space that you feel are worthy of your attention. Out there, at the end of the day, what do options traders need? They need a little bit of volume, need a little bit of volatility. They can do the rest themselves. And it's hard to argue you don't have both of those in spades in a lot of these markets we're talking about here today. So certainly merits another look just on that basis alone, even if you have questions about the underlying or anything else like that. From a volume and volatility perspective, these underlyings are delivering. And Greg, if they want to kick the tires and light the fires for themselves and dig even deeper into the data than we have a chance to do here on the show, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, so we have a weekly newsletter. You can find that at amberDataDerivatives.substack.com. If you want to visit our application, our web app, to look at all the options data, you can go to pro.amberdata.io. And then if you want to listen to our podcast, it's called Amberdata Derivatives Crypto Options and Trading Show.
There you go. Check him out. When Greg's not talking to me, he's moonlighting on his own podcast. How's that going? You liking the podcast gig, sir?
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've had some really cool guests on, and it's great to be able to just understand what people are doing in CryptoVol from all different corners.
Yes, the guests, many and varied as they are, do certainly bring some interesting perspectives to the table. So certainly fun. Check them out, listeners. Of course, it all begins Amberdata.io, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. That's going to do it for us on the network today. Back again tomorrow. We're rolling out the Pro Q&A hot seat. If you want to check that out for yourself, see who's joining us to answer your questions, or maybe start submitting your questions, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to begin that journey. Wednesday coming back for a lot of you listening to this show. I know you're crypto native. Maybe you still have some questions, but some of these terms we're throwing around still a little new to the world of options. We got a double dose of options bootcamp coming at you on Wednesday. So be sure to check that out. If you're listening on the live, on the pro side, of course, you'll get access to that immediately. The folks on the on-demand side, those will be coming out over the next couple of weeks. Back again on Thursday for This Week in Futures Options, and of course, episode 2 for the week of the option block with our buddy, the Flow Master. And then Friday, back again for a little bit of volatility views. And then after that, exclusively for our pro folks, back again for a little bit of options oddities, maybe some of this crypto flow. Make it onto the show this week. Have to tune in to find out. And then we're back again next Monday. What insane things will happen between now and then in the crypto markets? Well, you got to tune in to find out. We'll see you back here next week on the Crypto Rundown. And stay safe out there, everybody.
The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.